Hello everyone, welcome to Wild Woodland Lavender Farm. My name is Carrie. In one of my more recent videos, I picked 42 pounds of rhubarb from my 4 rhubarb plants. And I have been processing them over the last few days, but I actually sold about 30 pounds of that rhubarb. So it was nice to be able to make a few extra dollars from our garden. And I've also been making some jam. So far I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 pints that I've made. And this is 2 ingredient rhubarb jam. And I'm going to be doing a video on how to make this coming up real soon. And so that's what has taken up most of the rest of that basket of rhubarb. And this right here is all that I have left of it. So I'm going to be using some of this for today's recipe. I'm going to be making rhubarb fruit leather, and this has 3 ingredients: rhubarb, 4 cups of chopped rhubarb, 1 cup of sugar, and the zest of 1 lemon, and that's it. So the other things that you need for making fruit leather is a pot for cooking the jam in. After you've cut all the rhubarb and combined everything, you put it in a big pot to stir it. Now 4 cups isn't all that much for this pot, and I could probably use a smaller one, but I like this one because it has a really nice thick base for making jam, and so it doesn't scald as easily. You'll also want an immersion blender, or you can use a food processor or a blender. I like to use the hand blender so that I have fewer dirty dishes that are easier to clean. So these comes in real handy. Okay, if you have a lemon zester, that comes off somehow. That's good for zesting the lemons. I guess you could use a regular grater. I never really zested lemons much before I got a lemon zester. I just kind of shied away from using lemon zest before I got one of these. And that's about it, besides a knife for cutting and a cutting board for the rhubarb. So that's it. We'll get to cutting this rhubarb and get out this recipe. When I'm cutting rhubarb to be used in a recipe like this, or for the jam, I like to cut it into smaller pieces. And when you have a large piece of rhubarb such as this, what I do is, after trimming off the edges, hello, at the bottom here I just trim off right here, like that. And you can cut it in half if it's a little hard to manage. So what I do is I just go ahead and make 2 slices down the length of it, so that you're cutting it into thirds like that. You can see it's got some nice red color in there. Gonna make some nice color for my fruit leather. Then I just go along and slice it like this, so that you have pieces about that big. They'll cook down quickly and evenly. Now you'll notice that I start to get strings hanging off like that. It's no biggie. Just so they're not a nuisance, I just pull them off like that. It's not gonna make a big deal in the end whether or not they're in the recipe. One of these huge long stalks is actually about a cup of rhubarb just in and of itself. So I'm only going to need about 3 of these stalks to make one recipe. You can see more of these strings here. You can leave them in because they'll get ground up in the blender, but I just like to take the clumps of them out. Alright, put that in the measuring cup. That was only half of a stalk, and I've got almost a full cup just with that half. Now, over the last couple days since I picked them, they've gotten a little wilty. And that's quite all right, especially for baking fruit leather, because you don't want that liquid in there anyway. You want to be able to cook it off anyway. So if it's a little wilty, you can still use it. It's no big deal. So there, I have almost 2 cups just from one of those long stalks. For this next one, this is from a different rhubarb plant, one that is definitely more red throughout the stalk. So I'm going to use this just to make sure I get some really nice coloring for my fruit leather. Some people will add dyes or maybe powdered strawberries or something else to add that color. I personally don't mind if it's even just the green of the rhubarb, but it is nice to have that red. Alright, we're at about 3 cups now. I'm going to choose a slightly smaller stalk than the others. This will give me the full amount that I need. Now I like to use a shorter knife versus a longer, butcher style knife or one of those longer knives, because I like to have the more in close, tighter control with it. And then I like the serration versus just a straight blade, because for me it feels easier to chop through the rhubarb stalks. Alright. So that gives me the 4 cups that I need for my recipe. Right, now I'm going to zest my lemon. I am by no means an expert at this. I just run the lemon across the little grates until there's no more bright yellow in a spot. And a zester has blades that go both ways, and I don't really go both ways with mine. I don't know, just not experienced enough, I guess. Plus I'm too used to grating cheese, which is one way. Alright, so now I have a mostly naked lemon. I'm going to be saving this to do another recipe this weekend that calls for some freshly squeezed lemon juice. I added the rhubarb and the lemon zest into my jamming pot, and then we're just going to add a cup of sugar. My measuring cup was a little bit wet. Just going to scrape that out. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put this on the stove and cook it for 10 minutes. Now I'm going to actually let this set for a little bit and let the sugar draw out some of the juices from the rhubarb, so that when we put it on the stove it has that liquid in there to go ahead and start cooking. Alright, so my rhubarb and sugar have been mixed together, and trying to show you here, you can kind of see that there's a liquid now in there. This will make it easier for cooking on the stove now. So I'm just gonna set the stove to about medium, maybe medium high. This recipe doesn't say what temperature to cook it at, but the jam recipe that I follow suggested doing it on medium. So I found that's a good temp for cooking it and not threatening to burn. So we'll just let this cook for a bit until the rhubarb is nice and soft, and then we'll take the food processor, the hand blender, to it. Alright, so how do you know when it's gonna be done so that you can blend it? Right now you can see the rhubarb is actually kind of still a bright color. We've got the brilliant green, maybe not brilliant, but you have the green here and you have the red there. And you can see that they're quite bright at this point. I'll show it to you here in a little bit so that you can see the difference between when it's ready and when it's not ready. So this is obviously not ready. We've only been cooking it for a few minutes. We're starting to boil a little bit. We're going to let it cook about 10 minutes according to the recipe, and that's what I've generally found while making the jam too, is it takes, woo, you're steaming up there, steaming hot. It generally takes about that long to cook it down. Alright, so here we are a few minutes later, and a lot of steam later, and it might be kind of hard to tell through the steam, but you can see now, woo, lots of steam. Let's get past the steam, folks. Okay, you can see now that the rhubarb is not quite as bright. It's turned more to a pink and then to a very pale green. So this is about the time where I say, this is ready. I'm going to take it off the heat and get the blender going in it. You will also be able to mash it with the spoon as well, but it's getting very soft right now anyway. So let's get this off the stove. Alright, so here we go. I'm just going to stick the blender in there and mash it up. I was tilting it up on edge there because it's such a small batch. The layer is rather thin, which is hard to reach with the hand blender. So I just tilted it on edge so that I could have some deeper liquid to work with here. But this is looking really nice. It's a beautiful pink color, and that'll make some great fruit leather there. Alright, now it's time to dehydrate. There are several ways to dehydrate. One is with a dehydrator. A lot of dehydrators will come with a tray specifically for dehydrating liquids like this, or thick liquids. Or you can use parchment paper on the tray of your dehydrator as well. You can use a cookie sheet with parchment paper or a silicone sheet on the cookie sheet. Parchment paper works pretty well for that. When you're making it that way, you want to make sure to make the edges nice and thick, and perhaps even thicker than the center part, because the edges dry out first, and if they're not very thick, they end up very brittle and not so good, while the middle might not be entirely done. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine was a Pampered Chef consultant, and I saw this product that they had for making granola bars. And I was wanting to start making some of my own granola bars, so I thought, that's pretty handy to have. Well, last year when I was looking at making my sour cherry lemonade concentrate, I used the pulp that was left over from that to make fruit leather, and I put it in this, and these are about 1/4 of an inch thick, deep, and so I just filled these almost overflowing with the fruit leather and then stuck it in the oven on the lowest temp for several hours. And these made fabulous fruit leather bars. So I'm going to be doing that with my rhubarb leather, and they'll be very, very scrumptious. And in fact, I did taste I did taste the fruit pulp, and it's quite delicious. So I can't wait to get these done and in the oven. So let's go ahead and fill this up. All right, the sheet can be a little bit floppy. You don't need to use a sheet underneath it, but I'm going to, just to keep it from spilling as I put it in the oven. So I like to use a spatula that's on the thicker side, and it has a kind of a scoop to it. This particular spatula my best friend gave me many years ago for Christmas, and I was like, why are you giving me a spatula for Christmas? But I use this all the time, and it's still growing strong, and every time I use it, of course, I think of her. So if ever you want to give a handy gift that's long-lasting, give them a nice, good quality spatula. So I want these to be nice and full so that the fruit bar will be nice and thick. I'm just using the nice full scoops to go ahead and fill in another slot, and then I'll come back through when there's less in here so that the scoops aren't as big, and then I'll come back in and fill in the rest of the slots here. Make sure it's spread out within the whole slot. They're going to be really full because I'm trying to use up all of the puree here. So they're getting a little full, but that'll be fine. They're only going to go down from here. Of course, if you're just filling out a tray with a piece of parchment paper, you don't have to worry about how much puree you have. You just stick it all on. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. Well, just from the smell and the flavor from licking the spoon, I'm definitely going to be making more of these. Just setting the oven to the lowest, which I think is 175. And I'm just going to stick it in there. This will take several hours to bake down, to dehydrate, so it's going to be filling the house with a very pleasant smell for the rest of the day. So I'll check back in with you when these are done, and we'll show you how well they turn out. Alright, here's the final results of my rhubarb fruit leather bars. You can see they're really thick. These did actually take quite some time to dry, and sometimes I will actually just take them out of the oven and let them sit for a little while and then put them back in. Once they get to a dry enough point, I will turn them over and then let them dry a little bit longer so that they get more dry on the part that was facing the sheet. If you're doing these on a cookie sheet and it's thinner, it's not going to take as long as mine did, so that's something to keep in mind. But I do like the thicker fruit bars, and my boys tend to like that too. So that's rhubarb fruit leathers for you. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.